and welcome to another weekly update. In the UK, bit of a heat wave going on, so if you're in the UK, I hope you're managing to kind of tread that fine line between enjoying yourself and staying safe. It's definitely warming up, and so that's why I'm outside. So plenty of things to talk about this week, so let's get into it. First is around a blog post I did earlier in the week, which is kind of an announcement blog post, but I just wanted to dig into it a little bit around Empowering.Cloud, and I'm going to be doing monthly updates on Empowering.Cloud, and the blog post was about the July update which just landed. So every month I'll be doing a roundup of the things that are new in the Teams developer space. So that might be things around the Graph API, it might be announcements, it will touch on Azure Communication Services, it will touch on Teams Developer Platform, because I think those things actually do apply. If you're building in Teams, you need to understand the ecosystem around it, and that includes Graph, it includes Azure Communication Services, sometimes it will include Bot Framework and Cognitive Services. And so I'm doing a monthly roundup over there on Empowering.Cloud. So if you haven't heard about Empowering.Cloud, it's new, and it's going to be, well, it is already, in fact, the place for IT professionals in the Teams space, so Teams professionals, that might be IT pros, might be developers, to go for really high quality curated content to help you learn. So that doesn't change these weekly updates, they're going to continue. My blogging is going to continue on the blog, but this is in addition to that monthly updates. So if you find a monthly cadence would suit you well, go and check it out. It's free to sign up at Empowering.Cloud. Okay, other things that happened this week, a blog post I put out a few days ago all around Microsoft Teams Live Share SDK. So this was announced at Ignite, and I just kind of wanted to dig into it and just do some explaining about it, really, because it took me quite a little bit of time just to get my head around what it was and to sit down with the SDK and understand what does this SDK do. Easy for me to say. What does this SDK do, and what benefits does it unlock, and where can it be useful for developers? And how, as I did that, I went on a bit of a journey of understanding what it was, and that's what the blog post is, because I think describing it in those terms helped me understand where its capabilities and strengths are. So if that sounds interesting, if you saw at Ignite, if you remember, there was a prototype demo or the video demo of like a exploded turbine, like an engineering turbine that multiple people were collaborating on. You saw multiple mouse pointers. If you want to do an experience a bit like that, this live share SDK is, if you want to do it in Teams anyway, this live share SDK is the thing you need to understand, but it's not the only thing you need to understand, and that's what I go into in the blog post. So you can check that blog post out, it's on my blog, and I put a link in the notes. Okay, let's go on to another blog post, and this one comes from the Teams team, and it's a bit of a grumpy blog post, if I'm honest. I thought it was kind of interesting, and so this is about accessing Teams message data. Apparently, according to Microsoft have said that people are accessing Teams data via Exchange Web Services, EWS. Now, EWS is old, it's a legacy API. Microsoft do keep threatening to turn it off, but it is very feature rich, and there isn't complete parity yet with Graph. Anyway, it is possible to get Teams message data from EWS, apparently. Microsoft say it is undocumented and unsupported, and they don't want you to do it, and what they are saying is they're going to turn off that ability for you to access Teams data via EWS. They're going to turn it off starting September the 20th. So you've got a bit of time to figure out what to do about it, but Microsoft are very clear that if you want to get Teams message data, you need to be using the Microsoft Graph APIs, specifically the export APIs, I think, if you want to export message data. Now, the killer catcher gotcha here is that those export APIs may be chargeable depending on your application and what you're doing with them. So there's a whole model to understand there. I've done previous blog posts about it, I've talked about it on videos. So you go check that out. But yeah, I feel like maybe that is part of the reason that Microsoft are restricting access through EWS. Like, it's hard not to jump to that conclusion, if I'm honest. So yeah, so if you're accessing data via Teams message data, via EWS, this is not all data, this is just Teams message data. If you're accessing that via EWS, you need to stop, because Microsoft are upset that you're not using the export APIs, and they plan to restrict how you get the data out of EWS. Wow. So let's go somewhere else. Let's talk about Graph and a new SDK. Now, normally this would be kind of interesting, but kind of not. I'm not a PHP developer, but there is a new SDK aimed at PHP developers to give you access to Graph. Now that's good. Like, it's good to have choice, and if you're a PHP developer, that must be very useful to have a set of Graph SDKs now. The really interesting thing about this, though, is not necessarily that, which is fine. Like, if you care, like, the SDK is out, you can go and get it, check it out. What's really interesting, though, is that this SDK is the first one that's been built with Kyoto. Now, Kyoto is a new thing. It's a code generator. It's Microsoft provided. Microsoft wrote it. It's a code generator for creating SDKs out of APIs. So if you've got an open API, you can point Kyoto at it. It will make and spit out an SDK in C#, in Ruby, in PHP, in whatever language you want, whatever language it supports. But that's kind of interesting, because now it opens up the door not only for Microsoft to be more efficient in how they support all of these SDKs and keep them up to date, because actually there's no keeping up to date. If they can move everything over to Kyoto, Kyoto will keep it up to date with the API, which is really interesting. So you get very up to date SDKs. But the other thing you get is the option, theoretically at least, to have different types of SDKs. So if you want a very small, lightweight SDK because you really care about performance and download size, maybe you're writing a mobile application, then you could have that. Or you might want the full fat, I want everything because of IntelliSense type thing, and so you want that kind of SDK, or you could meet somewhere in the middle. So you could almost have custom SDKs for your workload, which is kind of interesting as well. So lots of interesting things to understand there. But the Graph PHP SDK, which weirdly is version 2, 2.0.0 RC5, but apparently it's the first PHP SDK for Graph, whatever. Yeah, but it is definitely the first one built with Kyoto, which is very interesting. So Kyoto is worth checking out as well if you have some time, because it is an interesting idea, and I'm excited for the future of how Kyoto can improve the SDKs that we're going to get out of Graph. I think that's pretty exciting. Alright, the last thing I want to tell you about is a new blog post from the Azure Communication Services team, all about file sharing with ACS. Now, the first time I read this, I thought, oh, great, ACS now supports file sharing in meetings and file uploads and file transfers in chat and stuff like that. That's great. Actually, it doesn't mean that. It sort of means that. It seems like in ACS there is no built-in native support for files. So files as a construct inside meetings and calls isn't well supported natively on the real back end of ACS. So if you remember, ACS is an API level over this kind of substrate of that powers both Teams and ACS. Then in that platform, in that substrate, it doesn't feel like there's like really deep built-in support for files. Could be completely wrong, not really sure. However, this blog post talks about how to do file sharing in Azure Communication Services, but it's implemented using your own blob storage. So you kind of bring your own blob storage. Now, it's not completely. The second time I read this, I was like, oh, this is nothing new. Microsoft have given you a tutorial on how you can implement file uploading in your application, completely doing everything yourself, and it's not quite that either, because the UI library, the components in the UI library will support file transfers for you. So you don't have to write all that stuff to do file transferring. They will give you event handlers when a file's been added, and they will accept messages, properties you send back to tell you that the file upload has completed, has started, has stopped, has errored, whatever, so they can do the appropriate thing in the UI. But the actual process of taking the file and storing it somewhere in blob storage so that you can get it back later, or other people in the meeting can get it back later, that is on you, the developer. So it's kind of an interesting middle ground, I thought. I was surprised that it's not natively built. I was expecting it to be natively built into Azure Communication Services. If you'd have asked me before today, does it support, does Azure Communication Services natively support file sharing, I would have said yes, because I didn't really think about it, but turns out it doesn't. And this is the kind of recommended way of doing it, which is interesting because it kind of makes you think, is that how they do it in Teams as well? Is Teams implementing its own, like saving of files off to a blob store somewhere? Obviously much more complicated and more resilient and latent and stuff like that, but it is interesting, and it opens up a potential thinking point if you're implementing this around where the data lives and the security and compliance and residency of that data, because it is now not part of Azure Communication Services. It will be something you put in yourself. Alright, that is everything from me. Kind of a lot to talk about this week, but yeah, so whatever it is you're doing this week, I hope you have a good one. Stay safe, stay well. If you're in the UK, stay cool, and I will talk to you again next time.